This evening, our topic will be creating bird-friendly cities and communities with author Timothy Beatley, who I'll introduce shortly. So we want to say a big thanks to our friends of NCTC for sponsoring these lectures and for their continuing education outreach programs in our local communities, which they've been doing for a long time too. And welcome to our local Potomac Valley Audubon Society folks. Good to see you out here. So you probably know World Migratory Bird Day was just May 10th. Of course, we're going to celebrate it all through the spring just because we can. We're very fortunate to have author Timothy Beatley with us to talk about his book, Creating Bird-Friendly Cities. Tim is the Teresa Hines Professor of Sustainable Communities in the Department of Urban and Environmental Planning in the School of Architecture at the University of Virginia. He's taught there for the last 38 years. Beatley's the author or co-author of more than 15 books, and he directs the Biophilic Cities Project at the University of Virginia. He's the co-founder of the university's Center for Design and Health within the School of Architecture. Earlier today, Tim safely migrated north on Interstate 81 to join us. That's a feat in itself. So let's give a warm welcome to Tim Beatley. Thanks for joining us, Tim.
You corrected my bio there and gave me the 38 years. I was kidding earlier today. I must have an older bio online, but it's a little shocking to hear the number 38. But oh well. Well, thank you all for coming out. All right, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about this idea of the bird-friendly city. Given the audience, given who you are, and how many birders are probably here, these are going to be things you already know a lot about, I suspect. I always like to start by talking a little bit about the work we're doing around biophilic cities. So this is sort of the larger frame of reference for me. So about 10 years ago, we started something called the Biophilic Cities Network. It's a global network of cities. We have 32 cities now that are partner cities and hundreds of individuals and organizations also involved in this. And the idea is built around biophilia, and that's a word you may know. The love of nature, literal love of nature and living things, living systems, the idea that we have co-evolved with nature to need and want that connection with the natural world. We believe it's not something optional. It's absolutely essential to leading a happy, healthy, and meaningful life. So part of this idea of a biophilic city is that we want to live in cities that are full of nature. We want to be immersed in nature, and we want to design our cities in ways that we are. And we believe, again, that nature is, again, not something nice to have, but absolutely essential. So that means we have to have it all around us where we are, where we spend most of our time, where we live and work, and that means the nature around us in cities. It can't just be that we get nature once or twice a year on a holiday, right? We have to design it, we have to include it all around us. So there's a webpage, biophilic.org. I'd love for you to take a look at that. I'm going to reference some things, some films that we've made and some other things. There's a lot of material there. There's a curated page for each of the 32 cities. So if I mention a city that you want to know more about, there's a lot more information there. There is a set of joining standards, and here you see so city councilman on the upper right in Raleigh, North Carolina, just joined 2 years ago, and that's a big Earth Day celebration. Cities have to submit applications. They have to talk about the ways in which they're already natureful and biophilic and the aspirations they have for the future. They have to adopt a certain number of metrics to gauge progress over time, and then they have to have a city council adopted resolution or proclamation stating the intent to be a biophilic city and to join the network. And so we're getting a lot of traction and hoping to expand the network around the world, really. Here is a little bit of a sampling of some of the cities. There is no one idea, no one way of becoming a biophilic city. The kinds of nature will vary depending on where the city is, the climate, the ecology, the politics. Everything's different, but a lot of really wonderful innovative things. It is something to be hopeful about, something that I am hopeful about. So that is kind of the broader context, and birds to me fit into this in a very important way. So here's a Fast Company story coverage we got when the book was just issued. And so there is a code. If you buy the book from Island Press directly, if you type in birds friendly, it should give you a 20% discount on the book. So for me, this started really from the perspective of someone who's trained in urban planning and wanting to design and plan and create these natureful cities, but yet recognizing that my field doesn't really even talk about birds. And we were talking about this earlier, Randy. If you picked up a typical comprehensive plan, community plan, master plan, and looked at the table of contents or looked at the index, you'd be hard-pressed to find a reference to birds. But for me, growing up, I have been a lifelong bird lover, an urbanist, growing up in a city, but a city full of birds. Birds are a big part of what makes a city magical. And so that's a big part of my message tonight. Not a new message for any of you. So the book has actually been translated now into several different languages. This is actually the cover of the Korean translation. And I show it in part because I think it's a beautiful cover, first of all, a quite different cover than the Island Press cover. And then they didn't ask me, and I can't read Korean. I didn't really know whether it's a good translation or not. But a Korean colleague mentioned that the title was not The Bird-Friendly City. The translation's actually Birds Change the City. And I thought, that's interesting, that they sort of changed the title of the book. But then I really started to warm up to the title. It's really a better title, Birds Change the City. Because I think that's really ultimately what this is about, having birds around us where we live in cities. We're an increasingly urbanized planet. We have to figure out how to do that, create safe environments for birds. We have to reimagine cities as good habitats for humans and birds together, right? And that's what will make urban life. It's one of the key things that, for me, will make urban life magical and wondrous. And having birds around is really a thing of delight. So birds do change the city. The city becomes profoundly a different place when we have abundant bird life there. So we have a lot of research. I probably don't need to convince any of you all who are bird lovers about the benefits, the values of having birds around, seeing birds, hearing bird song. It is, I think, one antidote to things like boredom, anxiety, and loneliness. We know that during the pandemic, we literally hatched a new generation of bird lovers and people who were buying bird feeders and listening to bird song and watching birds from their windows, and it was a major source, right, of it's a balm and a salve and a saving grace for a lot of us in a really stressful time, right? And so I don't know if we can continue that newly hatched set of bird lovers or generation of bird lovers. We'll see. I hope so. There is a fair amount of research about the therapeutic value of birds, seeing birds, hearing birds. A lot of evidence that our cognitive performance goes up in the presence of birds and hearing bird song. That our blood pressure goes down, our stress hormone levels go down. There are a lot of very important benefits that we get from having birds around us. Are birds the reason you feel good in nature? Well, it's part of the story. And there's just this large and growing body of research around the power of nature. So I had to present at a health conference not that long ago, and it's very difficult to summarize the literature, but all the things on the right are things that evidence that research scholarship has shown result from the presence of nature. So in the presence of nature, depression rates go down, our mood improves. Again, we're happier. We get increased physical activity, which makes us healthier. Actually, we know that greener neighborhoods help to propel us outside. We're more likely to be physically active in a neighborhood that's greener, that has more nature. There's even evidence from psychology now that in the presence of nature, we're more likely to be generous. We're more likely to be cooperative. We're more likely to think longer term. It's a good case to be made that we are better human beings when we have nature around us, and that includes birds. Birds help to make us better people, I would argue. Maybe that's a provocative proposition. I don't think so. So you can't sum it up very easily, but the research is growing. We like in the Biophilic Cities network to use the word flourishing because that seems to kind of capture all those things. It's not just the pleasure and delight and sort of practical benefits we get, but it's also about the deeper connection to place, a deeper connection to environment and to each other and sense of purpose, things like that. It's flourishing is what we want, and birds help us to flourish. So that's a bit loud. I'm just back from New Mexico, so I wasn't here to see the arrival of probably my favorite bird, the wood thrush, but I hear that and it immediately takes me back to my childhood. It makes me think of my parents. It makes me think of where I grew up. It deepens up my sense of connection and place. Can you imagine a world where we don't have bird song, the places where we live that don't have these kinds of sounds? And I'm going to gradually make us, or suggest that we need to kind of shift like the Val Plumwood quote suggests to seeing or to hearing voices rather than just sound, right? And I think most of us who love birds see birds in that way. They're not just these they're not just making sounds, they're not just inanimate objects out there generating sounds. They are entities, they are living creatures, they are sentient lives. And we want to share cities with those lives. You all know the statistics, and Randy had mentioned them earlier, that many of us were shocked right before the pandemic, 2019, this study, Cornell study that showed that we'd lost a third of our bird abundance only since 1970. Really a remarkable finding. And more recently, though, I'm not going to dwell on this because I think you all know what's going on. The last 2025 State of the Birds report for the U.S. just came out a couple months ago, and then this Nature study on the left, based on eBird data, shows that that decline is precipitous. It's continuing. It's very alarming. 75% of our North American species or U.S. species are in decline. There's no one reason, of course. It's multifaceted. I think for a lot of communities out there, it's hard to know what to do, and it's easy to get to be discouraged about the larger trends, which are very worrisome when we think about climate change and global deforestation and pesticide use and light pollution and all the things that play a factor in this terrible place we are now in terms of birds and lots of other things in the environment. But I do think that for folks who want to make a difference and do something, the idea of a bird-friendly city is hopeful in the sense that you can do things, right, in your own community. You can do things in your own backyard. There are so many things, so many positive steps that you can take. That yes, it's climate change and it is part of a larger global problem, but there are positive steps we can all make. So what is a bird-friendly city? I'm going to throw out a few things. So all the things on this list, and more perhaps, I'm not going to get to all those things. I have to put in a good plug for my friends in Canada. I have been serving for 3 or 4 years now on an international advisory panel to Nature Canada. Nature Canada runs a certified bird-friendly city program that's really the best that I know of. It's really sort of the gold standard in my mind. American-Canadian relations are not so good right now, so I'm worried they're going to eject me from this panel, but I hope not. I have learned a lot from serving on it, and take a look at their framework if you're interested. So there are mandatory standards that certified cities have to meet. including the establishment of a bird team. It's a really good idea. And then there's a whole bunch of variable scoring based on criteria in 3 different categories: threat reduction, habitat protection, restoration, and climate resilience, and then community outreach. Almost nothing they haven't thought of in this framework. So it's very comprehensive, and so largely a point system, and if you reach certain points, you get that certification. And there are now, probably now more than 30 cities that are certified. I'm going to have a couple of examples in the slides later. So if I don't get to everything tonight, and you want to get a sense of all the different things that go into imagining what a bird-friendly city is, this is a really good place to start. That's just in Canada. Now we have bird city initiatives around the U.S. as well, in different states. We can talk about that as well. So for me, this is also about, I mentioned being an urban planner and mentioning how birds don't really seem to be at the center of much of our planning, community planning, which is too bad, because just about everything that we design, build, plan in a city, whether it's a roadway or a housing project or a park, has clear implications for birds, right? For bird life. This is an article in Planning Magazine. I think it was the first time I'd ever seen any mention of birds. It happened to be an interview with me about this book. So in my small way, I've been able to kind of introduce birds into the mainstream planning community. This is the American Planning Association, which is our national professional body, a professional organization. You won't find any reports about birds or much consideration. So what do city planners think about birds? I think most practicing planners think a lot about them. They love birds, many of them, but they just don't figure very prominently into city planning or city design. We're at a time now, I'm not quite sure why it's kind of funny, something's happened and they've gotten some different fonts conversions here. But it is interesting now where many cities are facing pretty daunting climate change, right? And so we now have cities that are appointing chief heat officers because urban heat is such a big problem. So in Miami-Dade, that's one of our partner cities in the Biophilic Cities Network, Jane Gilbert, I think the first chief heat officer appointed to any city in the world. Athens was also a close second. In another of our cities, Los Angeles, there's a city forest officer. In Anna, there's a chief walking officer. If you want to create a pedestrian or walkable city, it would be nice to have a chief pedestrian officer, someone who stands up and represents that issue and that point of view. So maybe we need a chief bird officer. Could you imagine appointing a chief bird officer in your city? I don't know. I think you could be the first, and I would celebrate that. We need to elevate the importance of birds. So in the book there is discussion of some cities that have come close to doing this. So Vancouver, British Columbia, has had a long-standing bird committee, advisory committee. They've had a bird action plan that lays out in a lot of detail steps the city should be taking to protect and advance the interests of birds. So that's a really good step. The Canadian, the Nature Canada certification system requires that bird team, and that's, I think, a really good way of raising the visibility and importance of birds in a city. Maybe we ought to be changing the metrics of a city. How does a city judge how well it's doing and success over time? Some things it's usually economic metrics, right? It might be regional GDP or employment or something that may be quite important, is quite important. Maybe just as important would be birdsong. I keep proposing this as a metric for cities. I don't think anybody's ever adopted it yet. But I believe a good city is a city where every person in every neighborhood of that city gets to hear abundant native birdsong. That's a measure of a good city and a metric. So I had an interview with this UK newspaper. Ended up putting it on the cover, Why We Must Let Birdsong Be Heard in Cities Again. So I will give you some examples of cities. Wellington, New Zealand, a good example where they have aspired to returning native birds and the song and native bird song in the city. And there is this sense that, like a lot of things in nature, nature is again not an optional thing. It's a birthright. It's something we are all entitled to. Birdsong, hearing native birdsong, it could be thought of in that way. So we'll see if we can get some cities to adopt that. So what other things, what other elements would constitute a bird-friendly city? Well, a city that commits to educating its young about birds. Every student, every young child growing up should be able to identify, right, common species, not just of birds, but flora and fauna, but especially birds. So this is actually Adam Betul, who works for Birds, what's called Birds Georgia. Now we actually have a short film on our Biophilic Cities page, and by the way, I'd love for you to go to that, look at our films, because we've been making a whole 40 or 50 films that are sort of in the 5 to 8 minute range. So just long enough to sort of tell a story, just long enough to keep people's attention, short enough to keep people's attention. And so there's a short film about Atlanta as a bird-friendly city, but he's in a school, and he visits schools in the Atlanta area, and there are a number of examples of cities that have been emphasizing education about birds, incorporating birds into the curriculum of their schools. Some of you know about Birds in My Neighborhood. That's a program of the Chicago nonprofit called Open Lands, and they are now in 300 Chicago schools, and they've reached something like 12,000 elementary students so far. They have in-class training, in-class curriculum, and then the teachers and the students actually go into the neighborhood and go bird watching. So it's really a powerful combination of in-class teaching and experiential field work. So other examples, the Esperanza Elementary School in Los Angeles, in our partner city, that one may be one that you know something about. It's gotten a lot of attention. They, among other things, have the students and faculty, students and teachers have redesigned the schoolyard to be a bird habitat. Maybe it's time for us to kind of rethink what is essential equipment for a school and a bird habitat, and kind of reimagining, the experience of the space around that school may be an important step. So bird-centric schools and education. If you go through the Canadian point system, there are points that you get for having bird-friendly businesses. What is a bird-friendly business? Well, it could be a business that sells certified, bird coffee. Program that many of you know about, and there are other systems, other frameworks. This is actually an example from one of the Canadian cities, London, not London in the UK, but London, Ontario, and they are now certified. And it's a really interesting story where there was a craft beer maker in town, and joined with the city essentially to promote the certification of the city and to celebrate its official city bird, which is a northern cardinal. And that's what a lot of, you get points for having a city bird, for example. And so this particular, and actually an artist that was commissioned to paint this beautiful rendition of a cardinal, and it's on the beer, so it's Northern Cardinale. Okay, so maybe a craft beer business is one example. You might get some points for that. But I think we need to imagine more creatively what would bird-friendly businesses be, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But I would say that businesses that promote bird safety, bird care, bird watching, bird education, there are a lot of examples of businesses that do those kinds of things. And the more opportunities you have to buy a product or learn about birds in a store, so much the better. So one of the wonderful things about this book when it came out and during the 2020, late in 2020 and into 2021 and 2022, I got a lot of invitations to speak at bird clubs around the U.S. A lot of them were on Zoom, but increasingly they are in person. And so last spring, about this time, I was invited to go down to Blacksburg in Virginia and talk to the New River Valley bird clubs. Anybody, do you have any interaction in the Potomac Valley with the New River? No, maybe not. Okay. It's a wonderful group of people, and I'm not sure they learned a lot from me, but it was wonderful to be there and get a sense of what they do. And I've been getting that sense in various ways through my Zooms and so on. In this case, they have this regular set of things. They go through news and introductions and what the bird club is doing. And then every meeting, they choose one bird or two. They chose two birds on the day that I was there. And they present everything that they know about these two birds. And it's this wonderful exchange of information, of learning. And I show this because I do think that a bird-friendly city is one where there is social capital being built around the love of birds. And social capital meaning all the social relationships, the friendships, the connections, the social interactions that we have. That's what constitutes a healthy community is a social and political capital to me. So a bird-friendly city is one where an organization like this and a community of bird lovers plays an important role, and their voice is heard, and they play hopefully an important role at the political level as well. So this is another metric of what constitutes a bird-friendly city. But some of the things that you all know a lot about already, probably, that I talk a lot about in the book, different things that cities can do, many of the things that you get points for in that Canadian framework. Already mentioned, Randy's mentioned the dangers of buildings and glass in particular. You all know the statistic, I think, that upwards of 1 billion birds are killed from hitting windows or hitting buildings every year in the U.S. alone. Recent studies that now show it's probably much, much higher mortality than that. Most of us use that billion bird sort of placeholder. And it's a painful death, right? It's a terrible thing. It's something we can do something about. So birds don't, of course, see that glass as a barrier. They see the cloud reflected or the tree reflected. So we know what we need to do to make that glass or that building visible. Part of it is, of course, understanding the magnitude of the problem. There's a chapter in the book about Toronto and this organization called FLAP, Fatal Flight Awareness Program. Michael Mazur, an artist in Toronto who started this nonprofit that really the first time that in a kind of organized way that you see collision monitoring happening. So groups of volunteers walking the same path every morning around the base of buildings, collecting injured and dead birds, and showing them to the public in very dramatic fashion. This is something they do every year, display the dead birds that have been collected, and it makes front page news in Toronto. And it's had a huge impact in terms of awareness, and it's led to the adoption in Toronto, the first North American city to adopt mandatory bird safe design standards. So we know what we have to do with windows in particular. In the book, there's a little case study of the Jacob Javits Center. Most of you probably know that story. This is a convention center in New York that's been completely retrofitted with fritted glass. So this is a baked-in pattern, essentially, 2-inch by 2-inch or 5 centimeter by 5 centimeter. We know that's the density pattern that is necessary for birds to see that glass and to recognize it as a barrier. So completely retrofitted all the glass. Who's been to the Jacob Javits Center? Anybody? Yay. Well, it's been very effective. It's actually more than 90% reduction in bird mortality. And also really interesting is 26% reduction in energy consumption. Turns out when you install fritted glass or bird-friendly glass that there's a carbon reduction and energy reduction benefit, and New York has set some very ambitious carbon reduction goals for itself. So becoming bird-friendly, making buildings bird-friendly can also help on some other things as well. And at the same time they retrofitted with the glass, they installed a green roof that it turns out to be important habitat, nesting habitat for many birds. Here's the density pattern that is the evidence shows is necessary. And as Randy's going to show you some examples a little bit later, it was a discussion about the cost of fritted glass and glass, all the different options we have now. Your homemade system, Randy, didn't cost very much. One of my favorite examples is the Discovery Center in Philadelphia. Anybody been to the Discovery Center? It is it's a place to watch birds, but it's also a kind of a living laboratory for showing the different ways of making facades of glass bird safe. So this is a paracord system, do-it-yourself paracord system. They estimated that the cost was about $12 a window. So nobody can really complain about the cost of retrofitting glass, which is a big challenge. We have a 7 or 8 minute film on Biophilic City's webpage about the Frick Environmental Center in Pittsburgh. Anybody been? Frick Park? Randy, you're raising your hand a lot. It's a wonderful building. It's a green, a biophilic building. It has a lot of wood and a lot of really interesting biophilic design elements, and this wonderful rain ravine water system on one side. But there was a side of the building that was proving to be dangerous for birds. And so they worked with a high school class basically to design and install this very simple paracord system. And they went to Lowe's or somewhere and bought the materials for almost nothing. But there's in our film little mention of the bird safe part of it, but it's mostly about the building's biophilic elements. Watch the film. I have this on a number of slides. So at my own School of Architecture, we are trying to gradually make our building bird safe and doing a number of things. We have a student organization that's been very active at promoting these ideas. We've gotten some grant money to use Feather Friendly. It's a Canadian firm that produces this, kind of comes as a roll, and you basically install it. You pull one side of it off, it adheres to the window, and then you pull off the other side, leaving just the little dots. And it is proving to be very effective. So this is actually our cafe at the School of Architecture. One of the other things you can do, of course, is artistic things. So our landscape architecture students took on a sort of bridge that was very dangerous for birds. You could actually see through it. Large oak tree, right in the middle of this glass. So they designed this stencil, and in the course of 3 or 4 hours installed this artwork of birds, but with a message as well. Michael Mazur, this founder of FLAP, has frequently said that making buildings bird safe is an opportunity to make those buildings more interesting architecturally. And I think that's true. We have for some reason, have become enamored with this glass box, right? We're not very creative sometimes. So one example described in the book is the Student Center for what Ryerson University, they've now changed their name to Toronto Metropolitan University. So the Student Center is beautiful, and it's got this sort of multi-layered exterior facade that birds see very clearly. What you have is a very interesting building, visually striking building as well. It's not a boring building at all. And I tend to think the preponderance of glass structures is something not very creative and often very boring. Another example in the book, and actually we have a 10-minute or so film about this as well, is the Interface Carpet Company's headquarters building in in Atlanta. Anybody get down to Atlanta? This is really interesting because it is the skin, this polyester sheath that actually adheres to the glass. And it's, as you can tell, it's in the shape, or it's a full-scale eastern forest, essentially. So if you walk by this building or drive by it, you will never forget it. It's really quite remarkable. And because of the dappled light in the interior, it's a really interesting space to work in as well. So this is actually the place where people come and look at carpet samples, and so it's bird friendly. And it's not very costly. So these semi-transparent recyclable polyester sheathing is another option to make windows bird safe. So the good news is that the example that Toronto set way back when is now being followed by a number of other cities. So mandating bird safe design, bird safe windows, and bird safe building materials. San Francisco was the first American city to do it. New York City adopted local law 15 in 2020, came into effect in 2022. It is the largest American city to have now mandatory bird safe design requirements. So if you build a new building in New York City, you have to install bird safe windows and grills for the first 75 feet, right, from ground level up. And that's the most dangerous place for birds. And a lot of buildings are going beyond that, like this new NYU building. But anyway, this is the trend. The direction is going from incentives to mandates and scaling up. So this is, I think, very good news, in fact, for birds. So there are a lot of really wonderful things that we could be doing to design buildings that are not just safer for birds, but actually add in a significant way to their habitat value. They actually contribute to making that city more bird friendly, not just safe. We're not just reducing mortality, we're actually creating the habitat value. So I mentioned the green roof on the Javits Center, a little bit more information on site. 14 new species, but lots of birds. New York City Bird Alliance actually has been monitoring bird nesting, and it's fairly impressive, actually. The newest example of a building in New York that incorporates vegetation, and native vegetation in particular, that's good for birds is the St. John's Terminal. This is a new Google building. It's one at the terminus of the the rail line that has become the High Line Park. And I won't go through all of this, but you see a little bit of the evidence so far. 40 bird species are already using the habitat. So it has a series of planters at different floors that have been designed to serve as sort of an ecological ladder for birds as they get to the green roof on the top. And what's really impressive about this example is what's happening now, starting to happen, is that developers and architects are now collaborating bird conservation organizations. So the New York City Bird Alliance became, kind of an advisor, co-designer, if you will, of this building. I think this is the way we have to do it in the future. In the bird book, there's a fair amount of discussion about places where there are standards like biodiversity net gain, where you have to sort of show that at the end of a project, the end of a building, or the end of a development, that there's more biodiversity than there was when you started. This is one wildlife-friendly development that I talk about in the book, and visited and interviewed folks there, and it's really interesting for a lot of reasons, but this is a place where they have been designing in these swift bricks that sort of fit into the kind of normal brick pattern of the facades here. So it's not something, it just fits in. So it's a specially designed nesting brick to accommodate common swifts, and the population of common swifts have been not doing very well in Europe. So you can't see them very well, but what was interesting to me was that people were coming in to explore whether to buy a unit, a house in this new development, and they were actually, prospective buyers were actually saying, I want a house with swift nests, which to me was just wonderful, that there was this recognition that's something they want that would make their house their living environment very, very interesting. So I think we're going to see more of that, and there is a lot of work in Europe and elsewhere around rethinking facades so that they have multi-species habitats, so for birds, but also for bats and butterflies and invertebrates of all kinds of ways to reimagine that facade. Okay, one of my favorite examples, there's a chapter in the book about Singapore, and Singapore is an interesting example of thinking about bird conservation in a very dense vertical city. So most of the new growth is happening in the form of high-rise buildings. This is an island city-state, right? So they have limited land, and vertical growth is how that is the growth that's happening. So in Singapore, there's now a sort of friendly competition between builders, developers, architects to see how much nature they can design into those vertical spaces. And there is now something called the landscape replacement policy, a planning standard in Singapore that actually requires new buildings to incorporate at least as much nature in the vertical design as is lost by the footprint of the building. And now what we're seeing is multiplied many more times, much more space in that vertical realm than the footprint of the building itself. So this is one of my favorite examples. There's a firm called Woha in Singapore that does these wonderful green buildings, and they're actually monitoring bird activity and squirrel activity, and all kinds of, they're seeing the opportunity of designing a building in what was a tropical rainforest, and kind of trying to regenerate through the design of the building, the biodiversity lost. So in this building, you can't see a little bit of it, has a multi-tiered roof. If you were to fly over as a bird and look down, you would have a hard time seeing the building. 600 plus trees on the top, so essentially a forest on the top of this building. And we've got a short, a 10-minute film. It's not quite done yet, but was in Singapore about a month ago filming, and so if you're interested, check back in another month or so, and you can see we've gotten some drone footage, and also so it'll be a cool film. But we could be designing and building more projects like this. Now, obviously, not everywhere will be able to grow, greenery and nature, and not everywhere is a tropical environment. So anyway, light is another part of the issue for birds, of course, and we want to do what we can to minimize light pollution. I've just come back from New Mexico, where there's some just remarkable dark sky parks, some of the first dark sky sanctuaries and dark sky parks. We want, for a lot of reasons, right, to be able to have that connection to the night sky, and the sky glow is making that hard, and most of us can't see the Milky Way. Well, it's bad for birds, as that we light up cities, that attracts birds, they fly around, they become exhausted, they hit buildings and windows. So, as most of you know, we've had a number of cities that have participated in voluntary lights out programs, and that's another way of thinking about a bird-friendly city, reducing the impact of lights. I think we have to be more, cities have to do more than they are doing now. It's a very minimal effort in most of these lights out cities. Raleigh, North Carolina, I showed you an image earlier. Raleigh is now in our Biophilic Cities Network, the only city that I'm aware of that has a municipal policy for turning off municipal lights in the convention center, lights of municipal buildings during peak migration times. So that's a standard that every city should adopt, and a really good, I think, example. Pittsburgh, another city in our network, may be the largest American city to have adopted a dark sky ordinance. So you have to, for lights in the public realm, so street lights and lighting in parks and public lands, all that lighting now has to be dark sky compliant. So full cutoff lights that only shine down and not up or to the side. Those are the lights that are going to help us to see the night sky and to minimize the impact on birds and bats and other critters as well. So, and it's also about dimming and turning off lights at certain times, and it's also about, installing LEDs that are more on the warmer temperature scale, right, that we know are better for birds. So lighting is a really big part of what cities need to be doing. All the things that cities could do, I mentioned the Biophilic Cities vision of being immersed in nature, and that means protecting the nature that we have. That means protecting the trees, the older mature trees. It means protecting the canopy. It means planting native species of plants and trees wherever we can. In the book, there is a fair amount of discussion about the habitat certification programs that you find around the country, and there's a big profile of the Byrd Alliance of Oregon program, their backyard habitat certification program, which I think is probably the largest in the country, more than 12,000 participants. So this is essentially Portland. So when you start to talk about homeowners, 12,000 plus yards, front yards and backyards certified under this program, that starts to scale up in a meaningful way. So here are things that you can do, that everybody can do, thinking about their backyards and front yards. And cities can empower and can subsidize and can, in some cases, even mandate planting of native plants and trees. There are obstacles, of course, and this is a story from the book and a friend and colleague, Nina Marie Lister, who's a planning professor in Toronto. This is her front yard. That's her house. And she doesn't have a conventional turf grass yard. She has this amazing, beautiful native garden. And she says bird song, cricket song, pollination, a wide range of providing ecological services for the neighborhood and for the city. So what happened in Toronto, it turns out Toronto has had a tall grass and weeds bylaw that prohibits anyone in a suburban area from having anything that grows over about 8 inches in height. So a tall grass and weeds bylaw officer arrived at her yard one day and told her she was out of compliance and proceeded to fine her and tell her she had to take out this garden, essentially. This was just incredible. Most of us couldn't believe this actually happened in a city like Toronto that cares so much about birds and biodiversity. And so what happened is Nina Marie started a campaign, this amazing discussion in the city and also throughout Canada about what people should be growing in their yards and how they should be allowed to grow what they want to grow. And so she was able to actually get the Toronto City Council to change the law, change the bylaw, and now as a matter of right, you can plant the kind of native garden that she has there. So this is what we need, of course, and cities have to do what they can to support that. So in a lot of cities, particularly the West, where there are limited water, right? We have cities like Los Angeles and Las Vegas that are subsidizing the taking out of turf grass and the replacement with xeriscaping, and there's a financial subsidy that's often quite generous, sometimes referred to as cash for grass. Sounds like a drug transaction. A lot of cities are doing this. This is one of my favorite examples. We've written a little bit about this. There's an article in our Biophilic Cities Journal about it. And there's a chapter about burrowing owls in the book. In this case, Marco Island basically has created an annual financial subsidy for any homeowner who is willing to accommodate a family of burrowing owls. I mean, you don't select that family, right? They have to select yard. It's not a huge subsidy. It's $250. I love the idea. Creating a financial incentive to make room for a bird species. Okay, partly this is, of course, about changing our aesthetics. And these are some of David. David Howell is a photographer based not far. He's in Arlington County in Virginia, and he's this amazing photography of all kinds of animals, but especially birds. And we know, of course, that for some species, like owls, they need those snag trees. So partly this is about making room in the public realm and parks for places where we don't mow, maybe, or don't mow as frequently, or places where trees have a chance to decompose. And we're not just privileging the growth of trees, but we think about all the habitat, all the different kinds of habitats we want to create in a park or a front yard. So, there's so many wonderful stories of people and cities and communities that have stepped forward and worked to face a habitat creation of a park, maybe where there wasn't one before. This is my friend Mike Hauk, who's a birder in Portland, our partner city, Portland, and this is the story of the Oaks Bottom Wildlife Refuge, the first recognized refuge in the city of Portland. It was a landfill before this, and is now a mecca for birds, an oasis for birds. We have so many different kinds of examples. This is from an example from the Bosque, along the Rio Grande River in Albuquerque. Albuquerque has 20 miles of the Bosque forest. It's a really important bird habitat and a wonderful place where they're experimenting with farming techniques that are more bird friendly, creating fallow areas and places. Water, the moisture, there's a moisture gradient that favors different kinds of native plants, and they're already seeing the results of some of the bird life that's come back to this sort of river adjacent preserve. Or places like Edmonton, Canada, one of our partner cities, here using circuit theory or circuitscape modeling, this idea of kind of looking at a city in terms of like circuits, electrical circuits. Are there places where there are disconnects from the perspective of a bird, inability to cross a street, a place where the canopy maybe doesn't connect? And I love the idea of looking at the city through a bird bird's point of view. In the case of Edmonton, they now require the building of a wildlife passage for any new road or any new project. There are now more than 35 of them, and they benefit birds, but they're for all manner of critter, small and large, and they weren't necessarily expecting this, but they've seen a sharp reduction in wildlife car collisions, which is a really positive benefit from that. So places like Edmonton are really remarkable, but I've become a big fan of the return of beavers. So we have a short film about beavers on the webpage. Love for you to watch that. This is one site in Atlanta where the beavers are in the middle of a public golf course. And this one place where, this is me holding up, there are all these, lost golf balls that but the beavers are doing just fine. Birds are doing just fine, and golfing is happening around it. And so we have been trying to kind of make the case that we want in reimagining a biophilic city. There are things that humans can do, obviously, but inviting back beavers is so amazing what they do, right? They create dams, they create this elaborate network of channels that we have all this evidence about the biodiversity and all the other benefits. This is a really effective approach for managing stormwater and flooding. And it turns out in the West, these reintroductions of beavers are creating important fire blocks for wildfires. Really, really remarkable for cities as well. This is one little film I was going to show you. We've done some filming. This is from Seattle. This is a little park in Seattle, and you'll see it if you watch our film on the Biophilic City site. You'll see footage. But it was really interesting to see the neighbors who lived in homes around the park timed their visits to the park, the walking of their dogs in the evening, so that they could see the beavers. And so we tend to underestimate the benefit that we get from just seeing and being around critters like this. And you'd look at this; these guys are like, we've got the camera like right there, and they're very charismatic. So beavers, I did want to just make the point that coming back from New Mexico, just come back from 2 months there, living in Santa Fe, it's really remarkable to come back here and see all the green and how the rivers are so, in Santa Fe, the main river is about that wide. You see it here. And so one of the challenges, I think, is creating enough spaces of water for birds, right? We have a lot of, as cities become hotter places, the water that we have is often that municipal water feature that's highly chlorinated. It's not, not helpful at all from a habitat point of view. But these are all wonderful examples, and the ancient New Mexican acequia tradition, this communally managed network of irrigation ditches has actually created wonderful, expansive bird habitats in that state. So water is a really important part of this as well. Another dramatic example from another part of New Mexico, Silver City. Don't know if anyone has been to Silver City, probably not. It's pretty remote, but there is a wonderful story of what they call there the Big Ditch, which used to be Main Street. And because of a big flood in 1895, this 12-foot wall of water came through and basically created this gorge. And over time, the city said, well, let's just let it grow. Let's create it. And it's really, the bird life there is amazing. Water, and because of the trees and greenery. So this is a big part of what makes for a bird-friendly city as well. So I'm about out of time. I'm probably past my time. I am past my time. There are a lot of strategies, a lot of wonderful things that cities are doing to protect larger blocks of habitat. around and outside the city. The example of the tool of transferable development rights, which in King County and Seattle has protected about 150,000 acres of forest land, really important habitat for birds. I did have a bunch of slides about trees. We're creating a new Center for Forest Urbanism at UVA, and a lot of my work lately has been trying to understand what cities are doing to protect trees, particularly existing older trees, and things like tree codes. And every city, every bird-friendly city really needs to be thinking about protecting those existing trees. You can't just plant new young trees. We have to protect the existing trees. And it's a big challenge, part of it is about changing the psychology. We've tended to think that individual homeowners have every right to cut down their tree in response to whatever changing whim they have. This is my neighborhood in Charlottesville. For some reason, this person cut down 3 large trees. They were very healthy. No particular reason for why they did it. My wife suggested that I go and paint the word "why" on the stump of each of these three stumps. I thought that was probably not a very wise thing to do, so I didn't. But we do need stronger codes. So there are a bunch of little short films on the webpage. This is one of the films. Deborah Pearson's created this forest, old-growth forest behind her house. And the whole story of Atlanta's remnant old-growth forest is really a cool one. We have a short film about tiny forests, this Miyawaki method of planting mini forests, tiny forests, pocket forests. Do you have any Miyawaki forests around here? Do you know what I'm talking about? This is a method for planting trees close together. They self-compete. They grow very quickly. All the evidence is that birds are very, very good for birds. So we have actually planted 6 Miyawaki forests on the UVA grounds, and we have a whole forest patches initiative. So this film, I'd love for you to watch that one as well, but the idea of converting parking spaces into dense, tiny forests is a really wonderful idea. So anything we can do to make space. Wonderful or an interesting example, back to London, Ontario. But other ideas, we have a new film actually about coyotes, and it turns out that making room for coyotes actually helps with the cat predation problem. We have evidence that where there are coyotes, cats tend to not roam as far, and their impact is lessened. And so making room for coyotes is a good thing for lots of reasons. So there's something called the Atlanta Coyote Project, and there's a 10-minute film about that, which is really, really cool with the founder of that. But I do want to end with, there it is. So biophilic.org. Okay, I'll stop. Thank you. And do we have time?
Welcome to the Future of Conservation podcast series, coming to you from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's National Conservation Training Center near Shepherdstown, West Virginia. Thanks for joining us. Today our topic is Creating Bird-Friendly Cities and Communities with author Timothy Beatley, who will be our featured speaker later this evening for our monthly Conservation Lecture Series, now in the 26th year here. I'm Randy Robinson, Outreach Coordinator here at NCTC, where we continue to celebrate World Migratory Bird Day. Officially May 10th, but really all through the spring migratory season. And to help us celebrate, we are very fortunate to have author Timothy Beatley with us to talk about his book, Creating Bird-Friendly Cities. Timothy Beatley is the Teresa Hines Professor of Sustainable Communities in the Department of Urban and Environmental Planning in the School of Architecture at the University of Virginia, where he has taught for the last 29 years. Beatley is the author or co-author of more than 15 books, and he directs the Biophilic Cities Project at the University of Virginia, and he's the co-founder of UVA's Center for Design and Health within the School of Architecture. Welcome, Tim, and thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
So it's great you could migrate up the harrowing journey up I-81 there.
That's right. Not too
and
far
survived.
away, and I survived it. I did.
Well, let's start off by asking the question, what is a biophilic city?
Yes, well, biophilic cities, based, of course, on the concept of biophilia, this notion that we are hardwired to need and want that connection to nature. E.O. Wilson, not the only person to explore that idea, but kind of the one who sort of coined that term in the way that we think of it today. So biophilic, there's a lot of interest in the design world around biophilic design. A lot of that is focused at the scale of the building. How do we incorporate nature, green roofs and green walls, and bringing nature inside the building, natural daylight, all those things that make us feel better. We have all of this evidence about how the power of those natural elements, they calm us down, they improve our mood, they enhance our cognitive performance. And we need to be doing all that work at that sort of scale of building. But we also need to be thinking beyond the building. And so that's where the biophilic and the urban, the city part of that comes together in our vision for biophilic cities. So biophilic cities simply are cities that prioritize nature, that put nature at the center of their design and planning. And in our vision of what a biophilic city is, it's a nature immersive kind of city. So again, we want nature everywhere where we're spending time, and unfortunately we spend a lot of time inside in spaces like this, or not quite like this, but inside buildings. We want to spend more time outside. We want us to spend more time out of the building, and it's between those buildings and beyond the building and the city environment as a whole where the emphasis is for us and the biophilic cities movement. That was a long-winded answer, but...
Well, I walked out of my office this morning, or a little while ago, to come meet you, and I got outside, and I immediately felt better. It's beautiful out, beautiful day here.
Beautiful day here.
Spring day,
Yeah.
It's green, birds are singing, and
Right.
just felt good to be outside.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, there are lots of reasons to advocate for nature in cities. You've just had some big floods. I have down in Charlottesville as well, and we need trees and nature to help absorb and retain those floodwaters. And we need, as you mentioned, birds. We need the habitat value, but we also just need the elements of enjoyment and delight, and just living in a place where you have trees and greenery and nature and tree and birds all around us, and that's a biophilic city.
And so your new book here, fairly new book, is on the bird-friendly city. What makes a city bird-friendly? Well,
it's certainly connected to the biophilic idea, and I should say that I am not necessarily a birder. I'm a lifelong bird lover. And so for me, birds are just a really important part of how we think about the natural environment around us in cities and beyond. So I grew up watching birds, listening to birds, very much in a city, in an urban context. And so this book is about celebrating the importance of birds in urban life. And so I'm an urban planner by background and training, and so a lot of this has to do with how we can design and plan cities to take birds into account, make them safe for birds, think about how we can enhance the habitat values of urban environments, urban spaces. But really, at the end of the day, it's about that immersive nature. When you think about what we hear or see most often in nature, birds play a special role, have a special part to play in that biophilic city.
I mentioned to you a little earlier, we have a bald eagle's nest here, and for some years we've had a camera on that nest. People love it from all around the world. They watch the eagles in the springtime raise their young, and one of the things they especially love is just listening to it. I know a lot of people will just leave it on kind of in the background while they're at their desktop working, and listen to the birds, especially in the mornings. The
Yeah.
birds are out there singing, not necessarily the bald eagles, but all the songbirds
Right,
around.
right.
And it's just beautiful to listen to.
Yeah, and so back to this concept of biophilia, that we've co-evolved with nature, and that we want and need that contact. Biophilia is a multisensory thing, so it's not just the things we're seeing, but also all the other sensory experiences we have, especially sound. And sound is really, really important. And there's a lot of emerging evidence about the power of birdsong. And as an urban planner, I'm frequently telling cities that maybe birdsong ought to be one really important metric for what makes a good city. In fact, there's quite a bit of discussion in the book about that idea. Bird-friendly city is one that sort of prioritizes that seeing birds, but also hearing birdsong, and the idea that everybody deserves to hear that bird song wherever you're living, whatever neighborhood you're in that city.
And what we associate with most cities is noise.
That's right.
It makes me think back in the early 70s, I visited Zermatt, Switzerland at the base of the Matterhorn. And Zermatt did
cars.
not allow cars.
Right.
Only
car-free.
electric vehicles. And so it was very quiet.
Yeah.
And in the wintertime, you could hear the horse-drawn sleighs. You could hear the bells on the horses.
Yeah.
You could hear people talking and laughing. And it's a small town, but still it was very different to be in a small town or a city and be able to hear something other than noise of traffic.
Right.
Made a big difference.
Yes, I think we tend to forget about that dimension of a city. I mean, we do, urban planners do think a lot about noise and noise control and noise abatement, and we have a lot of evidence, of course, about the health impacts of noise, of living near an airport, or traffic noise is actually a big source. So urban planners do often think about what we need to be doing to moderate or minimize the negative sounds that we have in our lives. But the other side of that is that we've got all these wonderful sounds of nature. It's birds, but lots of other things as well, right? That depending on the season of the year, on the frogs or the peepers, whatever it is, that they're rustling of leaves, even just the sounds that you hear from having trees and nature around you. So these dimensions are interconnected. The more we manage the negative sounds, what we call noise, the more we're likely to be able to hear those positive sounds. So they're actually, the two agendas are closely connected, but in urban planning, we don't talk very much about the natural soundscape and about the positive sounds that we want to appreciate and understand. It's not common for cities to have done any sort of careful analysis or inventorying, if you will, of the kind of the acoustical assets that exist in the soundscape. So,
what got you interested in urban planning in the first place?
Well, I grew up, I was just telling you earlier that my hometown is Alexandria, Virginia, not terribly far from here. And I grew up I don't think my slides tonight will have it, but I'm often starting with an image of my house where I spent my entire childhood until I went off to college. And it was a very, very biophilic environment. So a wood and stone structure that my dad designed and built, and it was in the middle of a forest, in the middle of a city. So I grew up hearing birds and seeing birds, and I had multiple tree houses, and I was what you would probably call, or might call now, a free-range kid, or maybe even a feral kid, right? Mm-hmm. Where you have to call me back, for dinner, out there doing something in the woods. I had that kind of upbringing, and I also had parents who cared about the environment, and a mom who loved birds, and that's part of why I'm interested in birds. And the other part of it for my life was that my dad happened to be the mayor of the city. So I was the mayor's kid, mayor's son. I watched him as he envisioned this city, and a lot of things that he did as mayor there over about a 20-year period are things that have profoundly influenced the quality of that city, including pedestrian areas, trying to control the dominance of cars, creating a bus system, supporting the metro, which growing up, that was something just sort of unfolding that had a huge positive effect, I think, on Washington.
My favorite way to get around D.C. is the metro.
Yeah.
I don't
a little
like
bit
driving.
of a rough time right now, post-pandemic, but it was a transformative thing to watch as a teenager.
What compelled you to write the bird-friendly city?
Well, again, back to the urban planning part of this, that I don't think that you will find a typical comprehensive plan adopted by a community. This is usually the sort of overarching document that guides the city's growth and development over time. You won't find many mentions of birds. So for me, watching kind of the urban planning world and being in planning and teaching planning now for multiple decades, these are issues that are not really being talked about much in the urban planning community. So I love birds, and birds are such an important part of my life. Were growing up and are now, continue to be so important to me and add so much to the quality of urban life. So partly this was about writing something that could have an influence on the profession and practice of urban planning. That's not just what urban planners do, but mayors and city councils and planning commissions and citizens. And so I saw that there was not a lot of writing aimed at that group around what we could do, how we should design and plan and manage cities to better think about birds, protect and conserve and enhance the safety for birds in cities. So bird-safe windows, for example, for bird-safe design for buildings. That these things are now becoming more central, but still a need to pull all of this understanding, this knowledge together in a sort of book, I thought.
Well, when you think about birds, really, they're kind of ambassadors from the natural world, aren't they? They, even in the biggest cities, there's birds around. You might not see other wildlife, but chances are pretty good you're going to see birds, regardless of where you're at in the country. A lot of people love birds. They, if they're not birders out there with binoculars, they might feed birds, or they just love to see them, listen to them. And even in the big cities, you can still do that.
Yeah. That's right. It's an element of what makes cities magical, I think, is that often quite diverse bird life. And of course, lots of millions of birds that are migrating often around and through cities. Lots of dangers there, of course, lighting and buildings and windows and so on that we need to be designing, doing a better job sort of thinking about designing them with birds in mind. But there's quite a diverse bird life around us.
We're in the process here at the National Conservation Training Center of making our campus more bird friendly. We've done some of the windows that were the worst as far as bird strikes go, but we're in the process of doing all of them. Hopefully by the end of the summer, we'll have them all done with a design that dot patterns that birds can see and avoid them striking the windows, and also some other types of things like some people might call a Zen curtain or an Acopian bird saver, which we were looking at that earlier. They're simply parachute cords spaced about hanging vertically and about 4 inches apart. It was a very low-cost way of kind of doing it yourself.
Right.
I've done those on my windows at home, but it does work, and it just allows the birds to recognize that they can't, that there's something there, that it's not a reflection of a cloud or a tree. They can see the window there. There was an article. This was back 2014, I believe, but it was called "Migrating to the City," and you contributed to the article, and it was talking about birds. There was a photo of a bald eagle on a lamppost, and it was talking about a bald eagle's nest in Pittsburgh, in a urban part of the city that it was noisy. There was railroad train. There was a lot of havoc, but the bald eagle nested there nonetheless because the Monongahela River had gotten cleaned up to the point there were fish in it again. Of course, bald eagles want fish to feed their young. So, and that was an interesting article. Brian Millsap from our Migratory Birds Division in Fish and Wildlife was talking about, in some cases, birds, like a bald eagle, might find some sort of protection there from their natural enemies, like a great horned owl.
Right.
So it was an interesting article.
Yeah. Well, I think what that particular nest was on a stretch of the river that has later now actually become the city's newest park. And the story is that the park, there were so many people who were following the nest, following the eagles. And I think there was an eagle cam, the one that you have been using here, and so there were thousands of people who were kind of following the plight of this pair of eagles, and it brought attention actually to this natural space, which happened to be one of the best places to not only eagles but to just bird watch and so this park, 500 or 600 acre park now, it owes its existence in part to those birds. So it's an interesting sort of story. Sometimes it takes eagles to help make our cities more biophilic and to help them invest in things like parks, land protection. And actually Pittsburgh is one of our 32 partner cities in our biophilic cities network, in fact. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, I know we have bald eagle nests now in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore and up near Harrisburg. So they're coming back in a big way. I think we can say it's a conservation success story. The return of the bald eagle. Of course, many of our other songbirds are in trouble. We've lost 3 billion birds in the last 50 years. Estimates, research talks about particularly some of those migratory songbirds that come up from South America, Central America, and return every year, north and south. But our urban environments, we've got too many lights that shoot upward and mess up their migration. We've got windows for them to strike, communication towers with improper lighting. And there's been a lot of research done, and we know what to do. It's a matter, I think people are becoming more and more aware of it. And
they are,
so that's kind of what we're trying to do with our talk here today and where you'll be talking this evening. You mentioned the biophilic cities in the U.S. Can you talk about a few exemplar cities, whether in the United States or anywhere around the world that you can think of?
Yeah. Well, we have a website, biophilic.org. So love for listeners or viewers to look us up. And there is actually a separate curated page about each of our partner cities. So just a diversity of different places. Their opportunities are different, kinds of nature different, the ecology is different. So we don't have one sort of template of what a biophilic city is, but some wonderful stories of what folks are up to. Singapore, actually there's a chapter in the Bird Friendly City book about Singapore. It has become, it's a very dense, mostly vertical city, lots of tall buildings, and they're kind of pioneering the idea of vertical nature. So in Singapore, if you build a building, you're actually required to at least replace the nature lost by the footprint of the building with the same or more nature in the vertical design of that building. So sky park, green walls, green rooftops, green elements, many of them actually supporting birds and bird life. So Singapore is a wonderful example. And actually, in the presentation tonight, I'm going to talk about Wellington, New Zealand. Is also discussed in the book. They're doing a number of things, but one of the things they've done to help birds is to create a predator-proof area in the center of the city. So many of their native birds have been in decline because have been heavily impacted by introduced species, non-native species that have predated on them, and these are many birds that are flightless or are particularly vulnerable to rats and domestic cats and other critters. So they've actually erected a predator-proof fence around this area called Zealandia. And the birds, the native birds, have been coming back. They've been rebounding, and actually people are now in Wellington are hearing native bird song and seeing species of native birds that they haven't seen in a generation. So it's quite a positive story. So where else? We've got some cities in Australia and India and lots of really wonderful things. Each city's doing something a little bit different. But Portland, Oregon, with its green streets, Los Angeles with its emphasis on mountain lions and creating movement corridors, and perhaps the world's largest land bridge or wildlife bridge so that mountain lions can escape the cars that you talked about earlier and the road dangers of roads and highways. Edmonton, Canada is another of our partner cities. They have been building wildlife passages throughout the city, now requiring them actually for any major development in that city. So many things that fall under the sort of rubric of coexistence. We sometimes use that idea of coexistence. We want birds, and we want mountain lions, and we want all these wonderful non-human species around us, but we know that we've created lots of dangers like cars and like windows. And so there's so many things that our cities are doing to help minimize those dangers and to coexist with those
Makes me
species.
think of Austin, Texas, with the bats that
Yes.
live under. It's become quite a tourist attraction.
That's right.
Just to see the bats leave the 6th Street Bridge in the evenings.
Yes, that's right. In fact, Austin is another of our partner cities, and yes, the 1.5 million Mexican free-tailed bats that come every summer. It's a draw for tourism. Hundreds, sometimes thousands of people come as the sun goes down to watch the bats emerge, and it's a wonderful story actually, because when they first arrived, it wasn't by intention. They had just renovated that bridge, and the spaces were just right for the bats. And so when they arrived, the first impulse was to eradicate them. A lot of people saw them as a danger, as a health risk, and it took Merlin Tuttle, the founder of Bat Conservation International, who's kind of a hero for a lot of us, and he almost single-handedly, turned the view around and got the city council and others to recognize that this was a positive thing, not a danger. And that's really one story I think that helps to highlight what a biophilic city is. A city, biophilia, literally the love of life, life and living systems. And here's a tangible story actually of a city that's decided to love bats. They're good for tourism, but they're also just wondrous and magical. And
not to mention all the so-called ecosystem services, or the good things that bats and birds do for us.
Absolutely, right.
Preventing, eating bugs, eating mosquitoes, eating agricultural pests.
Right.
The unbelievable numbers of them, the bats do, that is.
Right.
And there's so many that emerge from some of those caves between Austin and San Antonio.
Yeah.
They can pick them up on the flight radar.
Right.
At night, going out and eating unbelievable numbers of bugs that save us humans, fertilizer, pesticide, number, dollars, real dollars. And so you've written a number of books. I'm just going to run through.
Oh, no, please don't.
Quite a list. The Handbook of Biophilic City Planning and Design, Biophilic Cities, Resilient Cities, Green Urbanism.
Kind of a theme there with cities. And
Green Urbanism Down Under.
Yeah.
Native to Nowhere, Sustainable Urban Development. How did you first get interested in green urbanism and sustainable development?
Well, again, back to childhood. I think for most of us who have a love of nature, it starts at that phase of our life. And again, my parents, and I had an aunt who was a botanist, a very well-known botanist, who would visit, and she had a major impact on me as well. So there are a lot of influences, and when you start to think about what you want to do with your life, and in combination again with kind of growing up in a very interesting city, watching my dad be involved in local politics and doing what he wouldn't call himself a planner, didn't call himself a planner, but I discovered later that's essentially what urban planning was, all those things that he was working on. So the urban planning part of it kind of blended with the nature and the environmental love. And so those two things have sort of come together. Green urbanism is one set of words we can use. Biophilic design, biophilic cities, nature-based solutions, all this kind of new language that appreciates the power of nature and the importance of nature in solving a lot of our human-created problems. The timing is just right for these things to sort of come together. So all those books, I mean, there are, I'm interested in place and how we create distinctive places, and so there's a placemaking part of this. There's a nature conservation part to this. I've written about habitat conservation plans, one of the first studies of those HCPs, a mechanism under the Endangered Species Act, very much a conservation tool. So it's kind of a spectrum of things, but my work focuses in one way or another on this intersection of urban development and urban design and cities and the natural world, basically.
And you mentioned habitat conservation planning. That's one of the meat and potatoes of our courses offered here at NCTC, and it has been for many years. We talked about the Aldo Leopold Lodge and some of your other books, The Ecology of Place and Ethical Land Use. Aldo Leopold's land ethics
Right.
are themes that continue here at the National Conservation Training Center. But you've also got some titles on coastal zone management, natural hazard mitigation after the hurricane, planning for earthquakes, coastal resilience.
Right.
All topics now that we're hearing more and more about after hurricanes and wildfires and so on.
Right.
So it's not just that it's sort of not just for animal lovers, but humans too.
Humans too, right? I mean, as we're all confronting the impacts of climate change, and cities have to be designed to be more resilient. So the challenges are pretty daunting when you think about places like New York City that may see a 2 or 3 meter rise in sea level by the end of the century. And I mean, these are pretty serious economic and social and political disruptions, right? So, it goes back to the 1980s. I did my dissertation actually on hurricane mitigation, innovative hurricane mitigation, and we found many localities that were worrying about those issues that long ago. We still are talking about it, and definitely. But it's all sort of interconnected in my mind and in my practice now. We We know that the things that will make a city biophilic, almost everything that you can do to make that city more natureful, whether it's green roofs or planting trees or maintaining wetlands, coastal wetlands, mangroves in some cities, will make that city more resilient. So the biophilic agenda and the resilience agenda are go together and have to go together. And so some of the most interesting things we're doing right now when it comes to thinking about coastal resilience, thinking about resilient parks, the parks now that are being designed to be floodable, to withstand that hurricane event, so that 99.9% of the time they're adding they're providing park space and greenery and environments that help connect urban residents to nature and water. We're drawn to water, so actually this concept of blue urbanism, blue cities. I don't know if you mentioned any of those books, but there are several books about ocean cities and blue urbanism. We're drawn to water, but there's the delight part of that, but there's also the danger, right? So we can design urban spaces, coastal neighborhoods, those coastal parks in ways that both make those investments resilient and make those cities resilient. Those parks end up serving as berms or as provide elements of protection for the city, but they're also, again, nature spaces that we can enjoy as well.
To hear more about natureful cities and communities, if you can join us this evening at NCTC, that's great. If not, this will be online and available. We want to thank Timothy Beatley very much for joining us today to talk about his book, The Bird Friendly City. And thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.